Hello everybody, today we are going to talk about classes. In the previous lesson we were talking about structures, and structures could define something, could specify something. Exactly, it could specify attributes of something. So for example, when I have an apple, I could say that this apple is, for example, green, it is red. I could say what type of apple is that, but I couldn't do anything with that apple. So I couldn't use it, for example, for eating. I couldn't eat it. I couldn't, for example, sell it. I couldn't buy it, right? There might be many things done to that apple. And in structure, we can't specify what can we do with something, what functions we can do with something, right? And in classes, it is possible. So class is just extended structure, and it can also specify the functions of something, and it has also lots of other toys that structures do not have, and we will try to learn them in next lesson. Okay, so I will create first the structure, and I will call it personal data, right? So personal data. And then at the end I will end this with the semicolon. Then I will create just one attribute, the age, and now here I will create a variable. The type is personal data. For example, I will call it person, and now I will set age to, for example, 50, and then I will send this thing to the output. So that things should be easy to understand because we did it in previous lesson. Okay, and now I will change the structure to something what is called class. So class is also our own type, right? And let's see the differences between class and structure. As you can see, now we have an error here that says short in personal data age is private. What does it mean? Well, everything is modified by something like that by default here. There is something like that, modifier private, and by default, and everything after it is just private, so it means that it can be used only within, so inside the class. So it can't be used anywhere else. If we want to use a variable outside of our class, we want to allow doing something like that, we should just change this thing here to the public. So we now say that everything after that thing will be public. Now you'll notice that the thing is working fine. Okay, so we have two modifiers now. You know, two modifiers now, the private and public. If I do here something like that, it means that age is private. And when I add here, for example, name, it means that name is public, but age is still private, okay? So private means that something can be used only within the class. The public means that it can be used anywhere. Of course, if we create the object, we create the instance of a class. Okay, and now I'd like to tell you what is that instance of class. This is just a single object. This is a copy of an object, and classes are used to define objects, to describe them, right? Everything around us is an object. I'm looking right now at the monitor, and this is an object. It has got some buttons on that can be used. It is created by some kind of company, and all the things can be described, right? So everything is an object. I'm an object. Okay. So this is called also an instance of class. This is instance of class means that this is a copy, and by saying that, it means that when I create second person, right, this person doesn't know anything about this person, so that objects do not know about each other. So when I change age in that guy to, for example, 20, I am changing the age of other guy, right? Of course, age need to be public then. And now, well, sorry. And now, as you can see, we have got now two copies of personal data, right? They do not know about each other. Okay. And now I'd like to tell you that all variables should really be in private sections. That attributes should be in private section here. Why? Because we don't want people from the outside, some like here, or any hackers, or any people that don't know how to use it exactly, our variables, to use them. We want them to use our variables only by using special functions that we create for using the variables. And the most common functions are called like that: set age. So this is the function that will set age, right? That we allow setting age from here. And this thing should return the void. And then it should take the integer, the age that we want to set it to, right? So, for example, this value that we want to assign to age. And then we can make the inline function here, right? And we can, for example, assign to age value that will be sent here. And of course, the semicolon here. And well, we are not able to change that thing here now. So we have to use the function person and now set age, and now we can send here, for example, 50, right? And well, we can send also it to the output here. So we need to create a function that will let us get the age from our class. So we need to return the short, and we call it get age, and then in line we'll return the age. So now we'll do person get age, and person to get age. You'll notice that in the first situation it's 50 like we said, and in the second situation it's of course random, right? Because we didn't set anything there. Well, we can do it. We can set the age here to 10. And you are probably like, now, geez, I had to create so many functions just to do that, and that was just bad. Really, this thing is important to do things like that. Why? Because notice, now we can, for example, do here something like that. If the value is lower than, for example, 0, then return, so don't do anything. Otherwise, assign a value here, right? Or if value is lower than 0, assign to age 0. We can now decide. We can now decide here how something will be set if somebody do it wrong way, right? So now if somebody do something like that here, so he will try to assign here minus 55. Of course, we need to do the else statement here, otherwise do that. As you can see, now we have 0 here. But normally, if the age was here, that way, and I would do something like that, I could assign easily as you can see, minus 53, and there were no function that could check the value here, right? So now we can check easily what is coming here, for example, like here. Okay, so that's why it's a good idea to make it in functions. Well, you have probably noticed that we have now the definition of functions in the same place where we have a prototype of functions for declaration. And this thing is also not well organized code, because later your classes might be longer, and it would be hard to read something like that. That's why we should create new files. So new, and now for example I want to create a file that will be the header. Go next. Remember about ticking that things here. Then we have to choose where we want to save it and name our file. So our first class, for example, right? Of course you can name it, it should be self-descriptive name, but right now our, well, we could call it maybe like, for example, people, something like that. So that will be the header with the classes that are connected with people, right? Now I will click the finish, and now I have the header here. I can now just cut that thing here and copy it to here. Then of course I have to include the people, and as you can see everything works fine. Now I should create the new file, the CPP version, right? So go next, C++, click the debug and release, then the people CPP, finish, and now here I should create definition of things here, right? So for example, that thing is now the prototype, right? And I should go to the personal data here. I will use something like that, personal data, and then the operator that is called the scope operator, and this operator let us, as you can see, go inside the class declaration and take, for example, that set age function, right? And now I can do something like that here. Well, int value, okay, and let's see if it's working. Of course we need to also add here what type we are returning, so we are returning the void type, and as you can see we still have errors. That's why that's because we didn't include the header here. Now everything will work fine. So now the setting works. We can do also that thing with the get age, but well, this is one inline function, and here we do not do right now anything else, just the get age. So this is really a good idea to just leave that thing here. But if we did something here, if we had more instructions in that get age here, we should also just take that function here. Okay, so if we want to define the function that is inside the class, we need to first say what type that function is returning. Then we should use the name of our class, then the operator of scope. So we're trying to get to the function that is called setAge. Then we should just tell what parameters that function it has and just define the inner function, right? Of course, that thing here is the prototype of function, so we don't need to specify the name of our variable here. It needs to be only specified here, right? Okay. What about situation like that? I don't want to create the special name for that variable here, like value. I'd like to do something like that. And then we'll notice one problem. We are trying to assign to age, and well, so I have to also always create new variable like age2 and then do something like that when age is lower or something like that. That would be time consuming, right? No, we can do something else. We can use something like that. This and this age, and now as you can see, everything works fine. How does this is work? That thing is just an address to the actual instance of class that we are working on. Okay, so we are trying to assign the value to the property, to the attribute, to the value from that class that we are working on right now. And the age here is the age that is sent here from outside. So for example, that minus 55 is sent here, and here we have minus 55, but here we are trying to assign the value to the age that is here, to this class, to that instance of class, right? Okay. Now I'd like to tell you about something very new in classes. Well, something what makes classes different from structure also. About something what is called the constructors and destructors. Constructor, as the name suggests, is used to construct our object. So it can define values like age when we create an object. So for example here. So how to create something what is called constructor? Constructor is like all other methods, but it is not returning anything, and it is called like our class. So it looks like that. We can of course define it here, but we won't define it here because we are writing the well-organized code, right? So this is the constructor, and now I'll do something like that. Personal data, and here we can, for example, say to every age 50 or to every age 10 by default. So when it's not specified, I do something like that, the age by default will be, as you can see, 10. We can send here something to the output, for example, cout this constructor has been just invoked, right? We need to first use the namespace here also and include the IO stream, because we're sending here something to the output, right? Now when I build and run that program, as you can see, we have on the output that the constructor has been invoked 2 times, right? Well, we've created 2 objects, so it had to be invoked 2 times. We could create a variable like that, for example, and send to the output something like that. Let's see. as you can see, this constructor has been invoked 0, 0. When I do the incrementation here, like that, we'll notice that this constructor has been invoked one time. How to maybe create a variable that will be the same for every object, right? So I don't want that variable to be different in each object. I don't want it to be every time the constructor is invoked to be zeroed, right? We can create the static variable. The static variable is just created once. And it means that now, when you run this program, constructor has been invoked first time, constructor has been invoked second time, right? So you can see this thing is right now static variable. So it is shared between all the classes, that variable. Okay, now let's talk about the destructors. So if constructors were used to create something, to initialize something, destructors are used to destruct our object. And it looks like that. Before the personal data, we have to add the sign tilde. And let's define that guy here. And let's just send to the output something like destructor has been invoked. Now here another variable. How many times, right? Now when I build and run that program, you'll notice that destructor has been invoked 1, 2 times. Where? When it met this place here. When you create a function, for example void test, and here I will create something like that, for example an array of the type that is personal data, you'll notice, well, let's comment that things here and let's invoke that function, that this thing is making run the constructor function 5 times and destructor 5 times. So every time our object meet with the closing bracket, it's being destroyed. Well, we don't have any more reference to that place, right? So we can't get access to that place. So why do we need it? Let's just remove that place and free that memory. That's cool. And we should remember that when we create something dynamically here, so for example I'm doing something like that, int, and then the pointer that will point to the variable that type is int, and for example here I will do something like p new int of 5. So I've just created an array of 5 guys like here. When I build and run that program, right now destructor here is not making that memory free. We should remember about doing something like that. Delete p. Okay. So now everything works fine. So destructor is a place where we should free memory that is dynamically reserved inside our class, because, well, people that will use our classes won't know what is happening inside of our class. They just want to use it. So it is our duty to make something like that. You should also know, and now you'll notice something very cool, when I create a pointer to our class, that we just created, our type. And now I will do something like new personal data 5. You'll notice something very cool. Only constructors has been invoked, right? So like I told you, that the new operator here is just returning us the address, the first element here, right? And that's all. That memory is reserved for us, and it will always be reserved for us. So we should remember about making that memory free here. You will now notice that when we do something like that, the destructor will be invoked, right? Okay? So we always need to remember about the things here, because our programs will work very bad if we don't do that things. I'd like to also tell you that you can overload that constructor here easily, because as I told you, the constructor is what? It's just a method, so we can override it. For example, I can now take here the short variable. Now I can define it here, right? And I can assign to this age from that class that I'm working right now on, age that will be sent here. And now we can do something like that. When I build and run that program, you'll notice that the constructor that was invoked was the default constructor, so that one here. And if I want to use that constructor, this is different constructor, so you will just notice that that one was invoked. Now as you can see, this constructor is still working, not that one. I will have to just send here, for example, 10, and here, for example, 50. So 20 and 50. And as you can see, now everything works fine. The destructor will be that will be invoked is that one, right? The constructor is that one this time. How to remember that thing here? Well, notice that when you're creating an object, so the personal data, so it's like that, right? Personal data, person, and we are sending to that function that 20 here, right? And then we are invoking that function here. Great. Now as you can see, that thing here is really well organized code. Now when I want to, for example, see how is that class constructed, I'm just looking at this. Well, here I have two variables that are private, and here I have two constructors, a destructor, two methods, right? Now, and I can see it easily, and now I will be like, how is that thing here defined, right? Oh, so I have to just go to the file that is called the same like that thing, but the CPP version. Now I'm looking here, and I can see how is it constructed. Otherwise, I don't need to know that. We can create here now, for example, comments. We can now say that this function is setting age. If age is lower than 0, then age equals what? 10. So as you can see, we can now make commands here easily, and they can be read easily. We don't need to know how is something working. We just know that it is working and doing thing that is described here. I know that right now, when you're not experienced programmer, that might be a bit confusing for you, and It's like, oh jeez, I have to write so many things to do something like that. But really, later, things like that are just basics, and you notice that they will save you lots of time. So please try to do things like I tell you, and try to also write things like you see in the videos. Notice that I'm, for example, writing the first letter of the class in the uppercase, because later when we are creating, for example, here a variable of our type, we know that this is our type, and we know that this is a class just by looking at it, because it has got the first letter in uppercase, right? And here, for example, in functions, the first letter is in lowercase, but when we are creating two words, the second word is in uppercase. All that things are really important, because then our variables are self-descriptive, they are easy to read, they are easy to use. Okay, that's all in that lesson. Thank you very much.